The weight of the crown is immense, but the secrets buried beneath its golden glory are even heavier. People often say the walls of Buckingham Palace have ears, yet those who live inside know that silence can reveal far more than words ever could. Everything started with one unexpected moment, a tiny crack in the carefully maintained image of the British monarchy. People say Catherine, the Princess of Wales, developed remarkable instincts after years of living under constant royal attention, but even she was unprepared for the night that silence finally gave way. It was a Tuesday, shortly after 11 o'clock. While most of the world slept, a private jet waited on a quiet military airfield outside London, its engines humming softly in the darkness. No official schedule had been shared with the press. No routine announcements explained what was happening. Queen Camilla, known for her calm public image and strict respect for royal protocol, was quietly leaving for Scotland under the cover of night. Behind her, she left only unanswered questions and a brief explanation that made little sense. But Catherine noticed the change. Looking out from the darkened windows of her residence, she sensed that something inside the royal household had shifted. To the public, the monarchy appears solid and unchanging, yet behind palace doors it works like a delicate machine. When one part moves unexpectedly, everyone inside feels the effect. This was not a state visit or a charitable trip to the Highlands. It felt like an urgent escape. A secret that had remained hidden for 45 years was beginning to surface, and the carefully guarded silence surrounding it was starting to crack. Just 2 weeks earlier, life at Kensington Palace had seemed perfectly ordinary. Catherine and William had returned from a short holiday in Norfolk with their 3 young children. They were preparing for an important period of royal duties, including a meeting of the Privy Council, where discussions about the future role of the monarchy in the modern era would soon take place. The calm and graceful image Catherine presented hid far more than anyone could see. She stepped from her car, wearing her familiar composed smile, but it never reached her eyes. Something about the atmosphere inside the palace felt different. A quiet tension seemed to linger around the Queen's private quarters, impossible to ignore. The first clear sign that something was wrong came before sunrise. Mrs. Margaret, Catherine's trusted lady-in-waiting for more than a decade, arrived outside her private sitting room. Recently assigned to Buckingham Palace to assist with internal affairs, she had become closely connected to the Queen's daily household. That morning, Mrs. Margaret looked unusually pale, and her normally steady hands shook as she quietly knocked. Speaking in little more than a whisper, she revealed that a late-night phone call had reached the Queen's private line after 11 o'clock. According to her, Camilla had not sounded calm. She seemed angry, frightened, and cornered, as though something from her past had suddenly returned. Moments after the call ended, the Queen ignored the normal royal household procedures and ordered a private jet to be prepared immediately. She informed her staff that she had to leave for Scotland that very night. Catherine felt an uneasy chill. Inside royal life, sudden, unplanned decisions rarely happen without reason. Every public movement is carefully organized to protect both security and the monarchy's reputation. A late-night journey to Scotland without the normal preparations was far outside the usual routine. Catherine gently squeezed Mrs. Margaret's hand and quietly instructed her, "Keep this matter confidential. Do not tell another soul." For the rest of the morning, Catherine carried out her duties while trying to quiet the growing questions in her mind. During a formal breakfast, she watched Camilla carefully. The Queen continued to appear composed, serving tea and responding politely as expected, but Catherine noticed that no expensive treatment could completely hide the dark circles beneath Camilla's eyes. Throughout the meal, she gripped her linen napkin so tightly that her knuckles stayed white. Every movement suggested someone under enormous pressure, constantly expecting something to happen. Later that day, Catherine made a careful decision. She chose to sit beside Camilla during lunch while the atmosphere remained calm. Their conversation centered on charitable work and the children's progress at school. Waiting for the right opportunity, Catherine casually asked, "I heard Her Majesty has a trip tonight. Is there something important?" A brief silence settled over the table. Camilla's smile became strained as she held Catherine's gaze for just a moment too long. Finally, she explained that an old friend in Scotland was seriously ill and that she needed to leave immediately. Her explanation sounded rehearsed. She never mentioned the friend's name or where they were staying, quickly changing the subject to George and Charlotte instead. To Catherine, the story raised more questions than answers. A private emergency did not explain why normal royal procedures had been set aside. Scotland also carried deep emotional significance for the royal family, making the sudden journey feel even more unusual. Catherine quietly committed every detail to memory, from Camilla's tense voice to her refusal to make eye contact. As evening faded into night, the private jet lifted into the darkness at exactly 11:15. Standing by her window, Catherine watched its lights disappear. She could not shake the feeling that this single journey would set something much larger into motion. The secret Camilla had hidden for 45 years was beginning to resurface, and Catherine found herself at the center of unfolding events. After the sound of the jet engines disappeared into the distance, silence settled over Kensington Palace. Princess Catherine remained awake. Sitting alone in her private office beneath the soft glow of a single desk lamp, she stared into the quiet darkness. To the public, she was the future queen, a symbol of stability and poise. But in the quiet hours of the early morning, she was something else entirely. It dawned on Catherine that the palace she called home might be standing on top of a secret that was beginning to surface. The following morning, the sun rose over London, yet everything seemed strangely different. The light felt weaker, and the atmosphere inside the palace carried an unsettling stillness. Catherine moved quietly through the corridors before asking for a pot of black coffee and settling into work. Instead of turning to the palace researchers or royal historians, she relied on her own private access, a privilege reserved for only a handful of senior royals. For hours, she searched through the Queen's household records, the glow of the computer screen reflecting across her face. She was searching for one answer. She reviewed Camilla's known friends, longtime associates, and the people who had remained close to her over the decades. She focused on finding the seriously ill friend in Scotland that Camilla had mentioned during lunch. No one matched the story. Catherine continued searching, and with every record she examined, her doubts grew stronger. Camilla's closest friends were all accounted for. Some were in London, others were staying at their country estates, while another was away at a Mediterranean resort. There were no reports of any medical emergency, and no sign of anyone in Scotland connected to the Queen's explanation. Scotland appeared in Camilla's records mainly through official royal visits and moments connected to earlier chapters of royal history. Catherine tightened her grip on her pen. "This cannot be a coincidence," she whispered. She knew that within the monarchy, a significant falsehood was rarely told without an equally significant reason. Determined to learn more, Catherine arranged a private meeting with the Queen's personal secretary, Emily, who managed every detail of Camilla's schedule. They met in a discreet conference room inside Buckingham Palace, hidden behind thick doors designed to ensure privacy. "Emily," Catherine began, her voice calm but firm, "I want to know more about the Queen's trip last night." Concern filled Catherine's voice as she asked, "Who did she go to see? What is the condition of this friend? Perhaps there is something the Wales office can do to help." Emily kept her eyes lowered. She clutched a leather folder so tightly that her knuckles turned white, her breathing shallow, as though she had been carefully instructed not to reveal anything. "Your Highness," she replied quietly, "Her Majesty said it was an entirely private matter. I am not permitted to disclose the details. Please understand." Catherine leaned forward without taking her eyes off Emily. "Even with me, Emily, we are one. Family. If the Queen is in distress, I need to know why." A long silence followed. Emily looked as though she wanted to speak, but instead she slowly shook her head. "I really cannot say anything more, Your Highness. Her Majesty gave very clear instructions. Absolute confidentiality." Catherine left the meeting with more questions than answers. This no longer felt like ordinary professional discretion. It felt as though everyone was protecting something. As she walked through the palace corridors, the atmosphere seemed unusually tense. Staff members lowered their eyes, conversations became quieter, and an uneasy silence appeared to hang over the building. For a moment, Catherine considered telling William everything. She trusted him completely and knew he would understand the seriousness of the situation, but she also thought about the king and the delicate position of the monarchy. If she was mistaken, sharing her suspicions could create unnecessary turmoil. She needed certainty before involving anyone else. "I have to do this myself," she decided. From that moment forward, Catherine began quietly gathering information. She contacted a small group of trusted former royal security staff whose loyalty was to her and William. She asked them to review the Queen's private call records from the previous 2 weeks and discreetly check private flights that had travelled toward the Glasgow area. As the sun began to set on the second day of Camilla's absence, Catherine received an encrypted message on her private line. Events were unfolding far more quickly than Catherine had anticipated. While the Queen remained in Scotland confronting something connected to her past, Catherine stayed in London, carefully following a trail of unanswered questions that stretched back 45 years. She still didn't know how far the mystery reached, but one thing seemed clear to her. The woman who had quietly left the palace was not simply visiting an old friend. She believed there was another reason behind the sudden journey, and she was determined to uncover it. As the private jet crossed the night sky, Queen Camilla sat silently in the cabin with a glass of untouched red wine resting before her. Outside the windows, darkness stretched endlessly, while inside her thoughts, memories she had tried to leave behind were beginning to return. To understand the fear weighing on the Queen's mind, it is necessary to look back more than 4 decades. The year was 1981, remembered around the world for what many called the wedding of the century. Millions watched a young bride walk toward a future that appeared filled with promise. For Camilla, however, those events carried a very different meaning. She believed Charles, the man she loved, had entered a marriage shaped by enormous public and institutional expectations. As attention focused on Diana, Camilla found herself pushed further into the background. Those emotions stayed with her. During long nights, she quietly repeated to herself, "I cannot lose him." In that emotional state, she turned to a man named Robert Hayes, a former intelligence operative with a reputation for handling sensitive private matters discreetly. According to this account, Camilla wanted him to apply pressure without direct confrontation. The assignment, as she understood it, involved psychological tactics rather than physical harm. She wanted Hayes to unsettle Diana through anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. Instead of simply wanting distance, Camilla hoped growing pressure would convince Diana to step away from the marriage on her own. She wanted rumors to spread quietly through the press and uncertainty to build around the new royal relationship. Looking back, she convinced herself she was protecting what she believed should have been hers. But Robert Hayes had ambitions of his own. After learning that the newly married couple would spend part of their honeymoon at a secluded estate in the Scottish Highlands, he allegedly decided to go further than expected. According to this account, an incident took place on a winding road near the estate when Diana's car was forced to swerve and ended up in a shallow ditch. No one suffered physical injuries, but the experience reportedly left a lasting emotional impact. Diana became deeply frightened during the remainder of the trip, believing someone was deliberately trying to intimidate her. At the time, those fears were largely dismissed as the anxiety of a young bride. Camilla, however, believed the situation had gone much further than she had intended. She immediately contacted Hayes. "What have you done?" she demanded. "I told you to pressure her, not to stage an accident. If this comes out, we are both finished." Hayes answered without emotion. "I did what was necessary to get the results you wanted. Now you pay for the silence, and you keep paying." According to the story, Camilla then arranged financial support that allowed Hayes to disappear into Europe, believing the matter had finally been buried by time. Years passed. Diana's life followed its own tragic course. Camilla later married Charles and eventually became queen. Everything remained quiet until a phone call arrived 2 weeks earlier. The voice was older, but instantly familiar. "Camilla," it said, "do you still remember Scotland 1981? I have the documents. I have the original letters you sent to my handler, and I have the recordings of our calls. I am back, and I am in Scotland." The ultimatum was simple: millions of pounds in cash, or the truth would be sent to every major news outlet in the world. The consequences would have been enormous if such allegations had ever become public. Camilla believed the monarchy itself could face a serious crisis, and she feared Charles would never see her the same way again. As the aircraft landed in Glasgow, she felt as though she was walking toward a past she could no longer escape. She carried a suitcase filled with cash, but far more uncertainty than confidence. Unaware of it, Catherine had already begun quietly following the trail back in London. While Camilla travelled through the remote Scottish countryside, Catherine turned her private office into the centre of a discreet investigation. She believed that using official palace channels would only slow the search for answers, so she chose a different path. She contacted 3 people she trusted completely: a retired intelligence officer, a surveillance specialist, and a longtime bodyguard who had served her faithfully for years. Behind closed doors, Catherine gave simple instructions. "I need you to go to Scotland immediately," she said. "Follow the Queen. Do not let her see you, and do not, under any circumstances, engage until I give the word. We are looking for a man from 1981. The team left separately on commercial flights under assumed identities to avoid attracting attention. 2 days later, Catherine received an encrypted update. According to the report, the team had located Camilla at a remote wooden cabin beside a quiet lake more than 80 kilometers from Glasgow. From a distance, they watched the Queen step from her vehicle without her usual entourage. Moments later, an elderly man emerged from the cabin. The investigators identified him as Robert Hayes. The team observed Camilla hand over a heavy black suitcase. In return, the man passed her a thick envelope along with a small padded box. The team leader immediately updated Catherine. "The transaction is occurring. According to the surveillance update, the Queen appeared increasingly anxious. Your Highness, she keeps looking over her shoulder every few seconds." Hearing the report, Catherine became convinced that this was not an ordinary visit. She believed the meeting was connected to events from decades earlier. "Do not let him disappear," Catherine instructed. "Once the Queen leaves for the airfield, I want him detained. It must be quiet. Coordinate with local Scottish police for a routine traffic stop. No sirens and no public scene." The operation unfolded exactly as planned. After Camilla's vehicle departed, 2 unmarked police cars stopped Robert Hayes on a quiet country road. To anyone nearby, it appeared to be an ordinary traffic check. A short time later, Hayes was taken to a small police station outside Glasgow, where Catherine joined the interview through a secure video connection from London. Looking directly at him through the screen, she spoke calmly. "Mr. Hayes, we have records connecting you to the Queen's private office. We also have footage from your meeting today. You are 70 years old. You can either explain what happened decades ago or face the consequences of your actions." The pressure quickly broke him. "I just needed the money," he said quietly. "My life has been nothing but shadows since 1981. She hired me, Your Highness. Camilla hired me to put pressure on the young Princess Diana. I was supposed to make her feel unsafe, to make her want, to run away from the marriage." He then admitted he had exceeded what he claimed was the original plan. "But I went too far," Hayes confessed. "I staged the accident in the Highlands. I wanted to prove I was worth the money." Camilla panicked afterward. She paid me to disappear and never mention her name again. But eventually the money was gone. Hayes then directed investigators to an envelope he had given Camilla and another hidden beneath the floorboards of his cabin, where the team recovered handwritten letters from 1981, a personal diary, and a faded audio tape of a phone call that he claimed featured Camilla's voice. The evidence spread across Catherine's desk left little room for doubt in her mind. Sitting alone in her London office, she carefully studied every document before her. She believed she finally had the answers she had been searching for, but she also knew the hardest part still lay ahead. The truth alone would not decide what happened next. As dawn broke, Queen Camilla's private jet landed at a military airfield outside London. Stepping onto the tarmac, she wrapped her coat tightly around herself and allowed herself a brief sense of relief. She believed the meeting in Scotland had gone according to plan. The cash had been delivered, the documents were supposedly back in her possession, and Robert Hayes had been dealt with once again. For the first time in weeks, she thought the events connected to 1981 had finally been left behind. That feeling disappeared the moment she entered Buckingham Palace. The atmosphere felt unusually heavy, as though something inside the building had quietly changed. At breakfast, Catherine sat across the table in complete silence. She offered no questions about the trip and simply observed the Queen. Her calm expression unsettled Camilla far more than any direct accusation could have. A sense of unease quickly took hold. Believing suspicion was growing, Camilla withdrew to her private study and summoned her secretary, Emily, along with 2 trusted assistants. Speaking in a quiet but urgent tone, she issued a series of instructions. The records for the Scotland trip must be edited immediately. There can be no mention of a private meeting. Add an entry stating that I visited an old friend named Margaret Thompson. Update the public schedule to reflect a discreet charitable visit. And erase every trace of the phone call from 2 weeks ago. Do it now. Emily turned pale as she wrote everything down, but she didn't dare to argue. A frantic effort to remove every trace of the Scotland trip quickly began. Electronic flight records were updated, household logs were revised, and contacts were approached to strengthen the official explanation for the visit. Camilla stood by the window, watching the activity unfold with growing anxiety. She repeatedly tried to reach Robert Hayes, hoping to tell him to leave the country immediately. Each call ended the same way, with no response. She had no idea that he was no longer answering his own phone. At the same time, Catherine was making her own final preparations. Although she already had documents from Scotland, she wanted evidence that would leave no room for denial. Looking at Hayes through a secure video link, she spoke calmly. "Mr. Hayes, Camilla is trying to erase every connection to you. This is your chance to tell the truth. You are going to call her." The plan was put into motion just after midnight. Alone in her study, Camilla answered a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hayes, I told you never to call me again. You have the money. Now get out of the country." What she didn't realize was that the conversation was being recorded. Following Catherine's instructions, Hayes continued. "The money isn't enough, Camilla. I can't live with the guilt anymore. The accident in 1981. You told me to do it. You told me to break her." According to this fictional account, the pressure finally overwhelmed Camilla. "How dare you speak to me? We paid you millions of pounds to disappear. The accident was only supposed to scare her, to make her panic and withdraw from the marriage. I didn't tell you to kill her. I told you to apply pressure." Panic overwhelmed Camilla as she ended the call. "If you say another word, we are all dead. Do you hear me? We are all dead." She dropped the phone and struggled to catch her breath, believing the conversation was over. In the silence, she thought no one else had heard what had just been said. Then the heavy door to her study slowly opened. It was Catherine. Standing quietly in the doorway, she held a small digital recorder in one hand. Without saying anything, she pressed a button. The room filled with the recording of the conversation that had just taken place. According to this fictional account, Camilla stood frozen as her own recorded words echoed back to her. "It is over, Camilla," Catherine said quietly. "The records, the Scotland trip, and now your own voice." Camilla slowly sank into her chair, realizing that everything she believed had remained hidden was no longer a secret. The truth, as Catherine understood it, no longer depended on documents alone. Morning arrived over London, but the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace remained tense. Catherine stayed awake through the night, the recorder resting on her desk as she considered what should happen next. She knew that whatever decision she made could affect the future of the monarchy behind palace walls, even if the public never fully understood it. At exactly 8 o'clock that morning, Catherine requested a private meeting with King Charles. Instead of following the usual procedures, she went directly to his private study. The king was sitting beside a window with a cup of tea growing cold on the nearby table. The years seemed to weigh heavily on him as Catherine entered the room. "Your Majesty," Catherine said, her voice a low, steady anchor in the quiet room. With a steady voice, Catherine finally spoke. "Your Majesty, I have something of grave importance to present. It concerns the Queen and a part of history that cannot be ignored." Charles looked up and immediately sensed the seriousness in her expression. Without another word, Catherine placed the recorder on his desk and pressed play. The room filled with the recorded conversation. Charles listened in complete silence, his face gradually losing all color as the words echoed through the study. When the recording ended, he remained still before quietly asking, "Is it real?" "I have verified the phone records, Your Majesty," Catherine answered. "The man she met in Scotland is in custody, and I have additional evidence connected to the events from 1981. Charles slowly walked to the window, struggling to process what he had just heard. After a long pause, he summoned Camilla to the study. When she entered and saw Catherine standing beside the king, she immediately realized something had changed. "Tell me it is a lie, Camilla," Charles said quietly. Camilla lowered her eyes before replying, "I did it for us, Charles. I was afraid of losing you." The room fell silent once again. Later that evening, a private meeting was held involving the king, William, Catherine, and the palace's senior legal advisor. After a lengthy discussion, they agreed that the matter would remain an internal issue rather than become a public scandal. An official statement was prepared announcing that the Queen would step away from public duties for an extended period of private rest and reflection. As the night settled over London, Catherine stood outside, reflecting on everything that had happened. William joined her, quietly taking her hand. "It is over," he said. Catherine looked toward the dark horizon before answering softly, "No, this is only the beginning." Behind the walls of the palace, life continued as it always had. Visitors gathered outside the gates, ceremonies carried on, and the public saw only the familiar traditions. Yet those inside knew that some moments could change history forever. What would you have done if you were in Catherine's position? Would you have told the king the truth, or would you have kept the secret to protect the monarchy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next royal mystery. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.